How's it going? This is Dr. Jeff, Rythmia Life Advancement Center. And today I'm going to talk about the guilt and shame game. So, what is up with guilt and shame? Well, we all have guilt for some things, and we all feel embarrassed for other things. And shame is something that's like extreme embarrassment. Goes along with guilt often. And obviously, every emotion that exists in the human sort of portfolio has a purpose. I need to feel guilty if I hurt someone. I think that's fair, right? It kind of helps us, these emotions help us keep on track with being, consistently, hopefully productive and positive people. However, guilt and shame used as tools of avoidance or of unresolved trauma become very problematic for us. And when we live in a place of guilt and shame, it's hard to move forward with happiness or any sort of productive, sort of realizing our goals. It's very difficult.
What I want to talk about today is how do you get rid of guilt and shame? How do you get it out of your sort of psyche? Well, when someone goes through trauma at a young age, and some not only at a young age, but also an older age. But let's talk about a young age. What happens is if they're, let's say, 5 or 6 years old and they're being abused or victimized or abandoned, it's impossible for that kid to understand why that's happening. They don't have the intellectual capacity to understand why they're being victimized. Their brain can't compute with it. So what happens is the child believes that it's their fault, and they feel that they are not deserving of love or attention or affection. And so they feel that they are less than. And then they feel guilty for causing their caregivers or whoever to do this behavior onto them. And they feel embarrassed and they feel shame. And that's one sort of emotion that pops up for a kid when they're going through trauma, to try to understand it in their way that they can. Because there must be something wrong with me if this is happening. So I must be guilty of something, which couldn't be further from the truth, because no one deserves to be victimized. No one deserves to be abused or hurt at all. So what a kid does is it holds on to those feelings for most of their life. They feel guilty about things. They feel embarrassed a lot. And in order to avoid those feelings, they don't engage with people in a way that's truly authentic. And they avoid intimate relationships. They might have a relationship with people that's sort of surface vibe. And the other people might not notice that, but the person that is experiencing the guilt and the shame does, and they don't feel really connected. So how do we get rid of guilt and shame? Well, one thing is to recognize, if possible, where it comes from. It's usually from childhood. Or during war times and during all kinds of historical events that were horrific in the history of the world, people that survive certain situations when a lot of the people around them did not survive have what's called survivor guilt. And that is something that was prevalent in World War II and also different parts of the world for other things. And people can feel survival guilt for lots of stuff. And that's something that as an adult that people experience. And the problem with that is a lack of self-awareness and also a lack of closure with what happened, because it was a horrific sort of world event. And it's hard to get closure on something like that. So the key to it is to be able to process these emotions out of the amygdala and also out through the prefrontal cortex, which is what plant medicine does. Now, meditation also does this. And so do other holistic sort of things. And also talk therapy can do this, depending on the relationship you might have with your clinician. So a lot of different ways to do this. But in order to get rid of guilt and shame, you have to do something that's pretty strong and consistent, because it's been ingrained in you probably since you were very little. So the best way to do it, in my opinion, to do it quickly, or at least get a huge jump start on it, is to do ayahuasca, to sit with ayahuasca. That's one tool that's very effective to help with this, because you get to realize that you're not the person that caused this victimization to happen to you. It's not your fault that this occurred. And you get to really connect with those emotions. Now, intellectually, we can connect with those emotions anytime, because obviously you're an adult now, you know that it wasn't your fault that some abuse happened to you. Obviously, intellectually, we get it. But the problem is the emotional part doesn't often go along with the intellectualization of this awareness. So in order to get the emotional part through and to connect with that emotional side and let it go free, you have to be able to connect with yourself emotionally. Now, how do you do that? It's not easy these days. Therapy is expensive. The meds you might be on are dulling your senses. They're making you sort of blunted. There's all kinds of distractions in the world, right? The rat race, all these people just trying to, just going through the motions of life and never really settling down and connecting with themselves. The last thing that a person or a company that wants to sell things to you, or a government that wants to control you, the last thing they want you to do is to sit and be connected to yourself, because then you're not easily manipulated. So how do you become not manipulatable, if that's even a word? The way you do it is you have to connect with yourself. And if you're going to connect with yourself, you're going to feel these emotions that you haven't resolved, of fear and trauma and shame, and probably some anger also, and all kinds of things that are difficult. So you have to do it in a safe environment. Rythmia is a safe environment. That's all my waking hours and sleeping hours are about, is creating a safe environment for people to do this kind of work and go deep. There's other safe environments that exist in the world, but I work at this safe environment. So I'm talking about this one. And this is a great place to do this kind of work and let the guilt and the shame leave you. And then you can actually choose what relationships you want consciously. And you can actually feel grounded and connected to yourself. So if you want to learn more about this, call our 800 number, book yourself or stay at Rythmia. I look forward to meeting you. Pura vida from Costa Rica. Hasta luego.